The 7th Legion. The Imperial Fists. Primarch, Rogal Dorn. Allegiance, Loyalist. Homeworld, Holy Terra, formerly Inuit. Current Commander, Gregor Decian. Specialization, Defensive and Siege Warfare. Battle Cry, Primarch Progenitor, to your glory, and to the glory of him on earth. The 7th Legion was truly distinct from the other 20 from its earliest founding. Not only were they one of the only legions to recruit exclusively from Terra itself, but the Legion had no qualms with taking recruits from territories that were considered the founding grounds of other legions. This meant that, while other legions would eventually feel a torn devotion between Terra and their Primarch homeworlds, the 7th would almost exclusively be loyal to Terra. Further, unlike many of the other legions we've discussed so far, the 7th Legion was only in its infancy when their Primarch Rogal Dorn was discovered on Inuit. As a result, the Legion had little time to accumulate or develop independent quirks and culture outside of the eye of their gene father. What followed was a Legion and Primarch that grew, adapted, and evolved together as one, which is what the Emperor had always intended. And perhaps this is why many have considered Dorn and the Imperial Fist to be one of the finest of the legions to have been sired. Very little is known about Rogal Dorn's early life. What we do know is that he was found on the planet Inuit and was raised by the Dorn clan. The head of the clan would come to be like a grandfather to Rogal, who learned much during his time under him. But one thing that occupied Dorn's time on Inuit was his fascination with the orbiting fortress ship that floated above the planet. He spent a lot of time on it, studying it and repairing it for use. In fact, when he met the Emperor, he was helming the ship, calling it the Phalanx. He offered the massive fortress monastery to the Emperor as a gift, but the Emperor instead left it under Dorn's care, as it would serve his purposes in manning and using his mighty 7th Legion. During the Great Crusade, the Imperial Fists adopted a philosophy of waging war that went beyond the normal and conventional approaches. To the 7th Legion, victory wasn't just about defeating an enemy, but forcing a capitulation within their society, or, as First Captain Sigismund put it, you must hold the fruits of victory. What this essentially meant is that when the Imperial Fists conquered a planet or people, they didn't just move on as most other legions might have, allowing Imperial emissaries and ambassadors to go about the work of converting and assimilating the populace. But instead, they would remain to erect fortresses and military installations with the goal of forcing compliance. This attitude and behavior was quite favored by the Emperor and the Imperium at large, leading to the Fists being regarded as the true rocks on which the Imperium might be founded. What was even more unique was the fact that the Imperial Fists didn't hold to the typical behavior of some Primarchs and Legions by forcing compliance through vacillation. When the Imperial Fists liberate a world or conquered it, they did not attempt to build up their own government or personal control, nor did they turn the planet into a vassal state. Rather, they behaved as guests and visitors rather than rulers. This was in contrast to such legions as the Iron Warriors or even the Ultramarines. But their attitude was not one of revelry or joviality. Indeed, the Imperial Fists would earn the nickname the Stone Men, for they were considered stern, disciplined, and very rarely lacking in any form of self-control. The Imperial Fists proved quite effective in assault tactics, but their true strength lay in their defensive strategies. It was commented by War Master Horus Lupercal that if his legion were to ever be forced to assail a defensive location protected by Dorn's legion, then the battle would go on for eternity, for it would be the greatest offense versus the greatest defense. And perhaps it was for this very reason that the Emperor gave the task of construction and protection of the Imperial Palace to Terra to Rogal Dorn and the Imperial Fists. After all, who better to be the Praetorian of Terra than the legion most regarded for its stern and unbreakable nature? When the Horus Heresy began, Dorn and the Imperial Fists were the first to learn of it, aside from those on the massacre of Istvan. Dorn at first refused to believe that Horus, a close friend, would ever betray the Emperor. But when confronted with overwhelming evidence, he had no choice but to accept it, and he swiftly fled to Terra and began preparing the defenses, commanding the vast majority of his legion to go to Istvan and do what they could to aid the Loyalists. On Terra, Dorn began working to bolster and fortify the defenses of the planet and the palace itself, for he knew that in time, the war would come to Terra and he must be ready for it. During this period, the Mechanicus of Mars fell into open revolt, and knowing that he didn't have the forces to bring the whole planet back under compliance, he sent Sigismund and 4 companies of Imperial Fists to take portions of the planet responsible for constructing Astartes' armor back under his control. Sadly, they failed, as the Mechanicus' stiff resistance was stronger than anticipated. They managed to retreat with over 12,000 sets of power armor, but otherwise, the 4 companies suffered massive casualties, and Mars, for the time being, was lost. And when Horus finally began the invasion into the Sol system, Dorn would begin efforts to contain the advances of the traitors, calling all available legions to return to Terra to assist. In what was known as the Solar War, Dorn and the Fist proved their martial capabilities of defensive warfare by claiming several crucial and debilitating victories against the traitor forces, not the least of which being the defeat and killing of Alpharius of the Alpha Legion on Pluto, accomplished by Rogal Dorn himself. But even their finest tactics were insufficient to stopping the heresy from reaching Terra itself, and thus Terra would become a great battleground. To go over the full siege of Terra would be obscene, as we'd be here for hours discussing everything, but what must be understood above all else is the crucial role played by Rogal Dorn and the Imperial Fist Legion. There was not a single aspect of the war Dorn did not have a hand in plotting, orchestrating, or reacting to. His legion was deployed to various battle points in crucial areas, from helping to reawaken the Astronomicon alongside Corswain of the Dark Angels, to supporting Sanguinius in his holding of the Eternity Gate with the Blood Angels, to even Dorn's duel with Fulgrim, which led to Fulgrim fleeing the battle entirely. If Perturabo and the Iron Warriors were the true workhorse legion for the traitors during the siege, then it was Dorn and the Imperial Fists who were the backbone and bulwark of the Loyalists as they held the line. What is necessary to elaborate on, however, is that near the end of the battle, when the Emperor and Sanguinius went on to deal with Horus directly on his flagship, Dorn would accompany them, though he would be too late to join the fight. When Dorn finally reached the Bridge of the Vengeful Spirit, he discovered the bodies of not only Horus, but Sanguinius and the Emperor himself. Dorn would then carry the body of his fallen father on his back all the way back to the palace, and place him on the Golden Throne in an attempt to save his life. Though, in the end, humanity and the Imperium were victorious, this action, this loss, would have a stark impact on the normally impassive Rogal Dorn, who was overcome with grief and trauma at the betrayal of Horus, the loss of Sanguinius, and the fate of his father. The heresy was over, but for Dorn and his Imperial Fist Legion, the worst was yet to come. The fall of his father was nothing short of devastating for Dorn, whose whole demeanor seemed to have shifted from a passive, stoic, and controlled commander into an avenging and furious son who sought to take revenge for the Emperor. He was the first to demand they take to the stars and hunt the traitor legions. Unfortunately, he was overruled by the High Lords of Terra and Guilliman. Dorn, however, would ignore this and lead the Imperial Fist to hunt the traitors wherever he could find them, only returning when Guilliman commanded it of him so he could be presented with his newly created Codex Astartes. The Codex was a new series of regulations and doctrines that Guilliman wanted all legions to adopt, the chiefest of which being that no force of Space Marines would ever be allowed Legion strength again, and must break itself into chapters of 1,000 Marines or less. This was meant to be a preventative measure, so that no Astartes force that turned traitor would ever have the numbers necessary to become such a threat to Terra. While Jagatai Khan of the White Scars and Corvus Corax of the Raven Guard approved of the Codex, Leman Russ of the Space Wolves was certainly not for it, and Dorn was outraged. He was so opposed to this codex, he went so far as to accuse Roboute Guilliman of cowardice and treachery for even suggesting it, having the gall to alter the Emperor's own designs and intentions. Meanwhile, Guilliman called Dorn a traitor for refusing to alter his legion in the face of obvious need. And this led to a rift between the Ultramarines and the Imperial Fists. At one point, an Ultramarine ship fired on an Imperial Fist ship in direct connection to this controversy. In the end, after meditating through his pain glove, Dorn at last accepted the Codex Astartes. But he did so on his own terms. You see, Rogal Dorn believed the Imperial Fists must be reborn in pain, and they chose to make this baptism at what was known as the Iron Cage event. Learning that Perturabo and the Iron Warriors were stationed in the Eternal Fortress, Dorn led his Imperial Fist to attack and destroy them, only to learn it was a cleverly planned trap. The Iron Warriors surrounded and began massacring the Imperial Fists, reducing them to individual melee fighting at points. And in the end, it was only thanks to the intervention of the Ultramarines that the Imperial Fists were able to survive and escape the massacre. Dorn took this as an acceptable baptism in fire to be reforged into a new legion. A legion of chapters. During the second founding, the Fists would break their legion into the Soul Drinkers, the Crimson Fists, and the Black Templars. However, Dorn had left a secret contingency plan known as the Last Wall Protocol. If a day should come when Terra was in great peril, the chapters would immediately reunify into a legion once more to defend Holy Terra. This protocol would be put into effect one time, and it would be the last battle of Dorn's Imperial Fists. In M32 came what was known as the War of the Beast. A massive and powerful orc warboss simply called the Beast had launched a full war on Terran space. The Imperial Fists, caught up in a battle with another alien race, were caught unawares and completely annihilated by the green-skin threat. Only one survivor was reported, Captain Corland. Corland escaped to Terra and enacted Dorn's Last Wall Protocol, summoning all successor chapters back to Terra to engage against the Beast and his invasion force. With the successors' combined strength, they were able to stop an attack moon, rescue and recover the Primarch Vulcan, and undoubtedly save Terra from the Beast. It was from the ashes of this war that the legendary Deathwatch Company was founded. However, there would be very dire consequences. Corland would be killed by the Beast, and with his death, the last of the true Imperial Fists would die with him. The Imperial Fists would have stayed dead if not for Maximus Thane, a member of the Fists Exemplar, who was named the new chapter master of the Imperial Fists, and he ordered all successor chapters to contribute a portion of their strength into rebuilding the Imperial Fists Legion anew. More than this, Thane would grow disgruntled and impatient with the High Lords of Terra, so when they were all assassinated by the Grand Master of the Officio Assassinorum, Thane was more than willing to let the Grand Master Vangarich rule the Imperium in his stead, while he left to contend with the remnants of the Beast's forces and take revenge for the loss of the Imperial Fists. However, as time went on, Vangarich would grow insane with power, and thus a campaign would be waged to destroy him, led by Thane himself. Though not bound by any law or order given, the Imperial Fists do not travel far beyond the Sol system anymore, determined to act as the sentinels of Terra. Aboard their ship, the Phalanx, they are a mobile bastion and bulwark against the tides of enemies who would see humanity fall. After Abaddon's 13th Black Crusade, this need to defend Terra has only grown even greater, and indeed, when Guilliman left to begin the Indominus Crusade, the Phalanx was stationed in orbit above Terra, and the Fists charged with working alongside the Custodes to defend Terra both inward and without. The result of this is that the Imperial Fists are always prepared to deal with the threats to Terra, but it also means they rarely travel outwardly to contend with the ones away from her. The Imperial Fists are renowned for their tenacious and stalwart nature. They are masters of understanding the ways of fortification. This makes them both experts at siege warfare, but also masters of defensive actions. This was most well displayed when the Emperor called Dorn and the Fists of Terra to construct the defenses for the palace. However, it should be noted the Imperial Fists can take this defensive doctrine of theirs to near obsessive levels. The Fists are so determined to maintain defenses and rearguard actions that there are cases of Imperial Fists who could have survived or even won a battle if they simply withdrew from a defensive perimeter, but refused out of stubborn tenacity to hold the line and died in the process. The Fists have what is called a Junker model of behavior, which means that they are the very definition of OCD. They pay attention to meticulous detail and structure in all they do, making them appear humorless and stoic in everything, displaying little emotion or interest outside of anything pertaining to their tasks at hand. This also leads them to having a great amount of interest in discipline, punishment, and pain for even the slightest inadequacy. Indeed, the Imperial Fists have a unique relationship with pain. They believe that pain is the ultimate form of growth and discipline. To overcome weakness and to ascend to higher levels of strength and discipline, one must first master pain and meditate on its value. A special tool the chapter is known to possess is the Pain Glove, a device that encases the Marine's whole body and subjects them to excruciating pain without doing any real physical harm. The Marine who goes through this pain does not hate it. Instead, they meditate on it and use it as a means to reflect on past failures and on the glory of their Primarch. It's also important to note that, ironically, while Dorn initially resented and hated the Codex Astartes, actively speaking against it and only accepting it when he was all but forced to, the modern Imperial Fists are almost as rigidly devoted to the Codex as the Ultramarines. Indeed, maintaining strict adherence to the Codex Astartes and to the fundamental expectations of a Marine's chapter is a point of absolute importance to the Imperial Fists. After all, they are the defenders of Terra, and it is known that on Holy Terra, Space Marines are not quickly trusted since the Horus Heresy. So the Fists know that they must do more than just be Astartes, but present themselves in a manner befitting their title and station. Some notable Fists include Gregor Decian. Decian is the current chapter master of the Imperial Fists, chosen to take charge after the death of the previous chapter master during the 13th Black Crusade. And that's it. Unfortunately, this is one of the notable issues with the Fists. We'll discuss it later, but it bears pointing out. Then there's Torgaradon, captain of the 3rd Company. Torgaradon was crucial in not only the 13th Black Crusade, but also single-handedly rebuilding the 3rd Company of the Fists, as well as his actions on Terra during the rebuilding period, where he worked alongside Custodes and fought the rogue Minotaurs wrapped up in the coup. And while he's not alive in the current setting, Sigismund is a very important figure to mention with the Imperial Fists. He was once first captain under Dorn, a master swordsman of such skill he could best any Astartes in combat, and became the first chapter master of the Black Templars. He was eventually defeated by Abaddon the Despoiler, but by Abaddon's own admission, it was not because Sigismund was weaker or less skilled. Indeed, Abaddon admitted he would have lost to Sigismund had it not been that age had finally caught up to the old Marine. The Imperial Fists have many strengths. Chiefest among them is their fine fortress building and The Imperial Fists have many strengths, and the chiefest among them is their capability in constructing and maintaining fortresses. The Imperial Fists are the finest fortress builders of any chapter that exists. They are unwavering in both discipline and structure, meaning they will never abandon a defensive position even against hopeless odds. You could ask for no better defenders or stalwart bastions against terror and chaos than the Imperial Fist. And in an area of the Imperium's history where so much of what was slowly being lost, the Imperial Fists are exemplars of striking tradition and the ways of their legion. They are staunchly devoted to their Primarch, to his ideals, and to his intentions. It could well be said that they were more faithful to the memory of their Primarch than they are to any other body of the Imperium. But with their strength comes flaws. Truly the greatest tragedy of the Imperial Fists is the fact that they have so little presence in the setting. Once they were one of the greatest legions among the Astartes, true crusaders who challenged Xenos and demons alike. setting up bastions and bulwarks upon several planets to ensure their compliance and allegiance to the Imperium. Now they are rarely discussed or seen. Indeed, while almost every chapter master in the current setting has lists of accomplishments before and after their installation to the rank of the Imperial Fists' own chapter master, Decian is an almost unknown figure. Further, the Fists have done very little of major note outside of their actions on Terra after the 13th Black Crusade. And, perhaps worse, this could be because the Imperial Fist specializations are in defensive campaigns and sieges. But this means that they lack the flexibility of other chapters, who expand their abilities like the Dark Angels, Ultramarines, and even the Black Templars, their successors. This means that the Imperial Fists, while gifted in one area, lack the flexibility to be useful in all areas, meaning they are not likely to be used in every campaign. I hear a lot of people tell me that their favorite legion is the Imperial Fists, that they're the best, that they're the most wonderful legion, and I usually respond with this. If you're talking about the 30k Imperial Fists, yeah, they were awesome, and they could be contenders for such a title as the best. But the 40k Imperial Fists? Well, if you can name more than 5 of them in the modern setting, I'll be impressed. Now, that's not to say that they don't have good lore, and I'm sure that plenty of their diehard fans could indeed meet my challenge of naming more than 5 modern Imperial Fists. But the average 40k fan would struggle with this, largely because they've done so little. What makes the Imperial Fist so cool is the fact that they are the exemplars of self-sacrifice and dedication. They are obsessed with holding the line and dying to the last man. There are more than a few cases in the Fist history where whole companies have nearly been eradicated just because of their determination to never give ground, which is inspiring, but this also means that the chapter is perpetually in a state of regrowth and rebuilding, and sometimes simply just trying to stay alive. For this reason, while I may not be their biggest fans, I do at least appreciate the Fist for what they represent, and yes, what they're trying to protect. I do like the Imperial Fists. My biggest problem with them is they were really cool in 30k setting and now just really don't do anything. And to give you an example of what I mean, consider this. The Black Templars, one of the first successor chapters of the Imperial Fist, got its box set way before the Imperial Fist did. The Black Templars are more recognized, more written about, and more loved than the Imperial Fist that they came from. And how sad is it when your own successor chapter gets more love from the writers and from the community than their own original legion? I am not saying this as a burn against the Imperial Fist, far from it. In fact, I'd say it's the opposite. I want the Imperial Fist to get some love. I want them to get some attention. Give them stuff to do, because I think that they are worth talking about. But as it stands right now, the last and most notable thing they did was show up on Terra to help root out a heresy after the 13th Black Crusade, and since then, they really haven't done anything else. It's time for the Fist to get some attention again, and I hope that they do.